Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and transformational life coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Hi guys, welcome back to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and today I wanted to dig into a topic that I know so many grievers deal with on a daily basis, myself included. I have so been there. And that is coping with insomnia, specifically after we endure a loss. And listen, whether this is a divorce, whether this is an ending of a friendship, whether it is a loss of a loved one, the goal of today's episode really is just to understand why getting quality sleep after the death of a loved one, we'll just kind of use that example specifically here today, can be so difficult, but also we'll learn some ways to cope with and hopefully eliminate that insomnia, or at least take some steps in that direction. So let's just start this off by saying, the period following the death of a loved one, especially within the first days, weeks, or even months, that is a recipe for dysregulation of all of the systems that control our sleep. So to get just a little brainy with you here for a second, our system is pumping out a combination of adrenaline and cortisol as a response to the stress of our bereavement, which in and of itself is enough to make anyone stay awake, right? It's almost as if we're like drinking an extra coffee or two throughout the day. But the thing is, we can't necessarily force ourselves to sleep, just like we can't force ourselves to just get over our grief. Like you probably know, it's not that simple. It's a process. But what we can do is provide some opportunities for our natural systems to become regulated again. And yes, that can take some time. And just to use a little personal example here really quick, when my dad passed away, and now my mom had been gone for 6 months, dad died 6 months later, and here I am by myself. And I was living in my parents' condo full time at that point. And I had also fairly recently broken up with my then boyfriend, now husband. That's a story for another day. I've talked about that on the podcast here a little bit. And so I was not only alone physically, but I, just emotionally experienced a lot of like loneliness and feeling very lost and a lot of just overall dis-ease. And for months, I slept on a pull-out couch in the guest bedroom, which actually, if you are watching this on video right now, I'm still currently living in my parents' condo. It was this very room, which is actually now my daughter's nursery / my office, but it was this very room that I slept in for a long time because I couldn't bring myself to go into the primary bedroom where my parents and my dad more recently had slept, even though there was a very nice, big, comfy bed in there. So eventually, I got to a point where I was so uncomfortable on this pull-out couch that I slowly began to make the transition into sleeping in that room. When I tell you that I had countless sleepless nights, like I am not exaggerating about that, or just really horrendous sleep, even if I did manage to get a little. And I remember nights where I hardly got any REM sleep, so any really deep, meaningful sleep, let alone any other stage of sleep. And I would wake up pretty frequently, and that act of actually falling asleep, that just felt virtually impossible. It was virtually impossible. I was up on hours on end. So I felt as I was coping with this insomnia, it wasn't just the insomnia, there's more layers to it here. And you probably know this if you're going through this. We might feel kind of like unsettled, really stressed out, tremendously heartbroken. I mean, we're grieving, right? There's so much that comes with that. And on top of all of that, in my case specifically at least, there was just an energy emanating in that bedroom. I mean, really throughout the whole condo, but like that bedroom, of course. And it's an energy that I felt like was my parents. And I don't know, it was so undescribable. It still is, but it was just really impossible to ignore. And I think that even contributed to even more of the lack of sleep. And on my end, it took, frankly, a lot of research and actually a conversation with a medium that I meet with every so often It's been healing in my process. I'm not here to say that you need to go meet with a medium, but for me, it's been very, very healing. And it took a lot of things to come out of that mental space and allow room for some peace at night. It was a process to get to feeling more settled and as though the space was my own and not ultimately haunted by my loved ones, by my parents. So with that all being said, I want to quickly get to a concept that you may or may not have heard before. At least I didn't, or maybe you haven't heard it in this context. And I want to quickly talk about zeitgebers. Okay, I'm probably absolutely botching that, so please forgive my pronunciation. Not a word you might hear every day, but understanding these and what they are, I truly feel like will really help you understand what's going on behind the scenes with our body, with our mind, all of it. As we slowly put the pieces of our life back together, new zeitgebers play a role. And for those who don't know, the word zeitgeber is a combination of two German terms, Zeit, which means time, and Geber, which means giver. So a zeitgeber is literally a time giver. So in nature, zeitgebers are cyclical or recurring patterns that help keep the body's circadian rhythms operating in an orderly way. So some examples of zeitgebers are light, right? Sun rising, sun setting, temperature, and eating or drinking patterns, just to name a few. These external cues around us help our sort of internal clock be consistent with the rhythmic cycle. So while we might not be able to force ourselves to go to sleep, we can, quote, force ourselves, so to speak. And by that, I mean, for example, setting an alarm in the morning and actually getting up to get up at the same time every day. So our waking time resets the whole circadian cycle. And this is just an example of something that can help over time. And even if we feel tired during the day, I hate the term forcing, but I'm just going to just bear with me. Forcing ourselves to get up with our alarm is a helpful first step. Or if it's not an alarm, even better with the sun. If you have that natural light that can come into your room and kind of gently wake you up. In fact, this is based on nothing except things I feel like I've already heard, but being able to get up with the sun is so much better and healthier for you than being jolted awake by an alarm. So just want to throw that out there too. But listen, let's be real. If you're up earlier, it's more likely that you're going to be more tired at a reasonable time of night, and you might actually have a shot at getting to sleep at a decent hour. So I know it's not always the case, but it's a step, right? It's something to try. So more daily life examples of these zeitgebers can be eating dinner around the same time or winding down after that in a period of kind of quiet time prior to going to bed. Maybe you're watching TV, maybe you're reading. But I do want to mention it is definitely advised not to watch TV in bed. I know so many of us do this. I am guilty of it. I'm going to touch on this in a little bit, but I want to throw that out there. If you can avoid the TV in bed, that's important. I'm going to talk about this as well, but mostly because of the light and the stimulation, right? So a final zeitgeber is getting to bed and kind of getting cozy under the covers with, warmth, smells, visual cues, turning off the lights, things like that. Because all of these things can be disrupted by the absence of a loved one. Think about it, especially if this is a partner that you're mourning. All of those things that you were normally used to are gone, or they're different now. So, all of those things, instead of being cues for comfort, they can be cues for grief and a reminder that your loved one is no longer here. When we're grieving, zeitgebers aren't just absence. Their absence can also be a trigger for grief-related ruminating thoughts. And that, of course, can cause pervasive thoughts. So it is no wonder that we can't sleep, right? So that being said, I want to touch on sleeping pills here really quickly. And I want to touch on why it's important not to take them if we can avoid it. And I will never, I even have this disclaimer in my show notes and everything. This is not medical advice. I am not a doctor. This is just my perspective from a grief coach and from a griever myself. I'm going to explain here in a second why I personally feel it's important to avoid sleeping pills, but listen, you consult with your doctor, you do what's right for you, always. This is just guidance, and there is a little science here that I'm going to throw at you as to why this is important. So I just want to throw this out there because I would be remiss if I didn't. Empirical evidence shows that sleeping pills do not help grief. They just don't. In fact, sleeping pills can actually make grieving worse for the griever over time. Even if you sleep better at night when you're taking one of these prescriptions, for example, eventually your circadian rhythm gets used to that prescription, to that drug use. People can become synchronized to the feeling of these sleeping pills along with the other things that they do when they get ready for bed. But if you were to stop taking the drug, you go back to having poor sleep again, or the sleep is even worse. Then the insomnia rebounds, and now you have to cope with the absence of your loved one, and now essentially a drug that your body has come to expect. Now, I've seen this firsthand. I know so many doctors have the best of intentions when they prescribe things like this. Again, I am not a medical professional. Consult with your doctor, of course. But in my experience, what I've seen is, there's a lot of amazing things about doctors. I am so not anti-doctor. What I think often happens is they want to help their patients, right? So they want to help a current in-the-moment problem. That is an amazing intention, but it's often doing the person who is grieving a disservice in the long run. And maybe for a time it's needed or it's important to do, but it's not going to get to the root of the problem. I just talked about this in like an episode or two ago where I was out with my husband and he was looking at these like gummies that are kind of supposed to help you sleep. So of course this is not a prescription. It's not very strong, but I was kind of telling him like, I feel like you need to get to the root of maybe why you're not sleeping as soundly as you could be, or, what multiple other things could you adjust that are more natural ways of doing things before going to a pill or a gummy or something like that to help you sleep. You know what I mean? So as much as we can, especially when we're grieving, you guys, we don't need to be adding other things into the mix that are just suppressing things at the end of the day. We need to be able to feel things and we need to be able to work through them, or it's just tamping it down and it's not really, we're not healing. We're not moving through it like we need to. So I just want to mention that. I think it's really important. I do just want to caution against this and at least provide a grief coach's opinion and perspective on why I would not personally go down that route and why that's important. But it's really just another example of how, time alone doesn't heal. It's your experiences that helps you along in this process. And the best thing that you can do for yourself is to work to improve your insomnia or sleep issues more naturally. So that all being said, I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about the importance of creating a routine, which sort of falls in line with the rest of this conversation. But I want to start by saying that I'm not going to belabor this point too much because I actually have an entire episode on creating a routine as we're grieving, how to do this, and why it is so important in episode 38. So definitely go check that out if you haven't listened to that already. But just to make a point here, having a solid routine is a really fantastic thing, whether or not you are grieving, let's be real. It's a good first step to gain a little semblance of normalcy again, and you can build onto it if you want to, or make it as simple as you want. But ultimately, it's just making it work for you and making it something that you'll actually look forward to. And I find that a routine is really important because, first of all, a routine that you enjoy can give you just a little structure or control in a time that can feel very out of control, which grief certainly provokes. And a routine can just kind of bring you back to the present moment, even just a little bit. And when you fill your routine with things that are beneficial to you and those natural systems and, dare I say, even make you happy, you're more likely to want to get up and do it, right? And do those things well and with intention and gratitude versus wanting to just go back to bed, or sitting there on our couch and just saying like, I don't want to do this, I can't do this, which is so fair. I have been in that state of mind. It's why I bring it up. But little baby steps to shift that are really, really important. So if you don't have a somewhat set routine already, and again, we might have a routine that's like imposed on us. Maybe you have to get kids to school at a certain time or whatever it is. Make sure there are things that spark joy for you in there. So is it your morning cup of tea or coffee? Is it journaling for 5 minutes? Is it going on a quick walk to kind of get your endorphins going? I mean, making it something that is peaceful and calm and happy for you, that doesn't always revolve around other people. So I just want to stress the importance of taking this a step at a time. Seriously, create a routine with just one step. That's it, one thing. Don't overcomplicate this, don't overwhelm yourself. All about the baby steps, as always. And quickly using our wake time example from a little bit earlier, maybe it's setting a consistent alarm that is your time to get up in the morning. You stick to that come hell or high water, and maybe it's just like 10-15 minutes earlier than you normally would have. But again, you're filling it with maybe reading something that inspires you, listening to a podcast that inspires you, whatever it is, and just really creating that sacred time for yourself. Real quick interruption here, and then we'll get back to this episode. If you're someone who is experiencing some form of loss and are trying to navigate the complexities of grief, which you likely are in some capacity if you've stumbled upon this podcast, then this message is for you. If you haven't heard about my Life with Grief membership and community yet, this is truly something you need to check out. This membership is here to guide you into living a deeper, more meaningful, and full life after experiencing loss. Who doesn't want that, right? I created this membership because I know what it's like to navigate and cope with grief on a daily basis, and I know the tools and support it takes to do this effectively. I've done the work myself, and I've coached people just like you to do the same. It comes down to having impactful, effective resources and tools at your disposal, having the right support around you from people who can understand and empathize with your grief, and having encouragement and inspiration around you consistently to not only elicit and spark change, but to keep it and keep the positive momentum going. Check out the details linked in the description, and I hope to see you in there. So to look at a morning routine really quickly, for example, maybe get one step in there, and then with time, think about how you can build on that. So to use just a couple of my own examples for a moment, typically 5 days out of the week, I get up around the same time, but also this is very dependent on my daughter. This is dependent on if I do have to go into the office, if I get to work from home that day, whatever. This looks a lot different than before I gave birth. Let me put it that way. But no matter what time that ends up being, I try and get some sort of a workout in. Now that I am a mom, that does not always happen. I'll be very honest and realistic about that. Usually though, one way or another, whether it's in the morning or sometime in the afternoon, I get a minimum of 20, sometimes even 40 minutes of exercise in, but that could be a workout or that could be a walk, so it varies by the day. Some days I might do like a 5 to 10 minute meditation in the morning. And while I certainly try and meditate as much as I can, admittedly, sometimes it just doesn't happen. Again, motherhood, life, things happen. But the moral of that story is I don't beat myself up over it. I go with the flow. I remember that tomorrow is another day to make it a priority, and I give myself all the grace. And so after I feed my daughter, after I hopefully work out a little bit if I can, and sometimes the order of these change too, by the way, but I also typically have like a little bit of a prompted journal entry that I do every single morning and evening before I go to bed as well. And in fact, this exact prompt is what is featured in my Losses Become Gains daily journal, which is available on Amazon. Shameless plug, I'm sorry. But I want to mention this because I created this journal specifically for grievers. And that is linked in the show notes. But essentially, it includes things like, 3 things that I'm grateful for that day, a mantra for the day, 3 things that I'm looking forward to. I rate how I'm feeling that day on a scale from 1 to 10. So really the goal, it's not to just have like a gratitude practice and call it a day. Like grief is more than just finding gratitude, but it's mindset shifting. It's perspective shifting. It's a little deeper than that, you know? So I'll touch on journaling again in a little while, but even beyond journaling, I want to just stress how important it is to begin your day with some practice like this, whether it's with my journal, which is specifically made for grievers, or something else. Maybe it's free writing. So again, a beautiful way to do this is more or less what I just laid out. Putting that gratitude, putting those good vibes out into the world for manifesting, what is available and what is present for you. I love having a mantra for the day, just something that comes up for you, something that resonates. You don't have to think too much about it. And something you're excited about. And it can be as simple as, again, your morning tea, your coffee, whatever this looks like for you. Again, maybe it's a walk around your neighborhood. Maybe it's playing with your pet, doing some form of art. Maybe it's a bike ride. Maybe it's trying a new hobby, reading a book, learning a new language, listening to a podcast, just like this. It can be whatever you want it to be, as long as it's something positive and something you're going to look forward to. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's all you're looking forward to that day. Maybe that's all you can muster. That's okay. That's fine, right? It's just, like I said, it's those little baby steps. It's slowly incorporating things that bring us a little more joy and fulfillment each day. So to finish up my example of my morning routine, immediately after I do this journal prompting and all the other things, I hop in the shower and I do whatever I need to do to get ready for the day. So sometimes that is, for example, just putting a moisturizer on my face and maybe a little eye cream and calling it a day. Sometimes if I'm going to the office, I might put my makeup on. But as I'm doing that, I'm listening to a podcast that I really enjoy. And I just want to mention, again, hopefully in my examples, I've made this clear, this can vary. This can change a little bit depending on what you have going on for the day. But the point is just having some semblance of consistency, because when we go through a major loss, especially if it's something very abrupt, i.e. a death, that can really throw us off and really throw us out of whack. So getting that normalcy, getting that consistency back in our life again when we're ready is a really nice way to kind of like re-regulate everything. So that being said, let's look at a nighttime routine super, super quick, because this is equally, if not more so, important in terms of navigating the lack of sleep that you're currently dealing with. So once again, I think it's really important to end the day with maybe a highlight of the day, something you're grateful for that day, what sparked joy for you that day, what was a highlight of your day? Is it just simply being here and being alive today? If that's it, that's beautiful. Go ahead and write that down. Was it watching one of your favorite shows or movies? Write that down. Going out and getting coffee with a friend? Jot it down. The list could go on here, right? But whether or not you write it down or say it aloud, or even just in your head to yourself and you're just acknowledging it, that's it. The idea is just acknowledging it. And to know that it's possible, and know that these little bits of hope and positivity are out there, that they do exist. And if you feel like something wasn't particularly positive that day, or you're just struggling to see the positivity, trust me, I know, I've been there. I have clients, I have members that struggle with this. I want for you instead to write down what would make tomorrow more positive or fulfilling to you. Start to visualize what a more healing, peace-filled life looks like for you. I really do want you to write that part down, because it's so important to manifest these things as they come to us. Not to get kind of woo-woo, but I'm going to get woo-woo here for a second. Write that down on paper. Manifest that for yourself. Look at how far you've come from when you first start writing these things down to 3, 4, 6 months from now. I have people that use the journal that I created that I mentioned earlier, and they'll message me, clients especially, they're like, Tara, I'm like a different person than when I started using this journal. I'm using it consistently. I'm being open-minded and open-hearted. And I look back at some of my first entries and I was in such a dark place. And now I still feel griefy. I still have my moments, but I feel lighter. I feel a little more free and at peace with things than I did previously. So, it's a beautiful, eye-opening process if you let it. And again, not every day is going to be easy. Not every day are going to have positives or have things that are, you're particularly grateful for. Or at least you might not feel very grateful, right? You might not feel that way. But this is a really important exercise in just getting out of your head a little bit to get in touch with those things instead of being sort of stuck in the mud of our loss and not lifting our heads and opening our minds a little bit to see a way through it. So perhaps you're winding down your evening with maybe like a show that you enjoy, or you're reading a book that speaks to you. And then maybe after that, you shower, you wash your face, you get in your pajamas, and all of these little actions starts to tell your mind and body, okay, it's bedtime now, we're winding down, it's going to be rest time soon, and that really helps you kind of get into that mindset. All right, so final thoughts on routines. And this was a big part of this conversation because I truly feel like it's so important. But grieving and the bereavement process, of course, feels very overwhelming, and you might find yourself changing your mind a lot on things or just feeling a bit unsettled overall. Just as in that process, the routine forming process can also take a little bit of time. We can feel like we're trying to find our footing with all of it. Give yourself permission to feel that and embrace it. Because I promise, with some time and with the right routine for you, you are going to feel a world of difference. And I want to stress just one more time, start small. I am talking one step and go from there. That is step one for a little while. And then on top of that, when you're feeling more comfortable with that consistency, maybe add another thing, and then maybe perhaps another. But don't get me wrong, this doesn't have to be some crazy 8-step regimen unless you want it to be. Don't feel the need to do that to yourself. The goal is simply consistency and something you enjoy and a process that you can trust. That trust is so, so important. And soon enough, other aspects of your life will no doubt follow suit. I really just can't express enough how beneficial and helpful this has been in my own journey and those that I coach. And again, if you're not already giving this a try and maybe don't have a solidified routine in the morning and the evening yet, your unofficial homework here, should you choose to accept it, is to give that a go and get one in place. And please remember, it has been shown through studies that it can take a minimum of 21 days to form a habit. So let's say you start this routine and it's a little rocky at first, or you feel like it's really just not working or sticking. Keep tweaking this routine if you feel it's necessary. If something in your gut doesn't feel right, or it's not bringing some semblance of relaxation and decompression to your life after a little while, then consider making some changes. But if you feel like it's more that you're sort of in your head with it, or you're not maybe giving it enough of a fair chance, be aware, be honest with yourself, especially if the steps are pretty reasonable enough or they're things in general that you would enjoy. Make sure you're giving yourself enough time to really get accustomed to it and try it out. So quickly going back to sleep for a moment, I wanted to touch on this in the context of a routine. Because let's say you have a routine, you might be nailing it, or you're at least working up to it, if nothing else. But let's say your sleep is still your frenemy right now. Let's just review some other quick ways to cope and improve sleep. Number one, your bedroom environment. Your bedroom environment has a lot to do with whether or not you can settle down for sleep at the same time every night. It is really important to make sure your bedroom is primarily used for sleep, if possible. So if you hang out there during other times of the day, or maybe you have a studio, right? And you are low on space, that's absolutely fine. Try and differentiate it as much as you can. So, maybe, for example, you read or watch TV, having a separate chair or a separate space to do that if you can. That way you are only associating your bed, especially, with sleep. Then make sure the bedroom environment itself is conducive to sleep. So experts say it should be relatively dark, quiet, somewhat cool, ideally around 65 to 68 degrees. Choose a mattress, a pillow, bed linens that are as comfortable for you as possible. more coming up on this. Another thing to mention is being mindful about light exposure. So kind of alluded to this earlier, but exposure to light at different times of day influences your internal clock, which can regulate whether you feel tired or awake. So getting some sunlight during the day, especially first thing in the morning, signals to your body that it's time to be awake. So a good tip is to try drinking your morning coffee, tea, whatever, outside or near a sunny window. That can really help you wake up again more naturally. Light at the wrong time of day can also throw off your internal clock. So if you find yourself scrolling before bed, hi, so guilty of this. I know, we all do it. Most of us do it at least. Try reading a book instead. Or even better, meditate or do some breath work. Blue light also emanated by phones and other devices mimics sunlight. So that's just yet another thing that's telling you to wake up rather than relax and get yourself ready for bed. Also keep in mind exercise. It's really important to make sure you're getting enough exercise and movement throughout the day. This was really good advice that was given to me when I was really struggling by a professional. And at the time, while I tried to still work out, it wasn't necessarily in a way that like wore me out, so to speak. So essentially, I just wasn't exerting enough energy. Mostly, there's a few reasons for this. I was working from home, so I was sitting a lot. I was doing more like weight training at the time. Of course, that exerts some energy, but this professional mentioned, try running, try riding a bike, either outside or like a stationary bike. Do something that exerts more energy that would basically wear me out in a more, intentional way. Now, truthfully, I am really not much of a runner or like a Peloton kind of girl. Major respect to anyone who is. And if you are, use this to your advantage. Please wear yourself out. I did try the stationary bike, and on some days it worked, some days it did not. But long term, it wasn't really my thing. But the point is, I tried. I made an effort to improve my health and my sleep. And honestly, I think even just that got me into a different and healthier mindset. Because when I did work out, even if it was mostly just the weights, I really made sure to focus on the workout and give it my all and exert that energy physically, but mentally too. So it really, like, by the time I was needing to go to bed, I had really kind of done my due diligence, and I was more tired at the end of the day. And the exercise was a part of the grander plan, right? There was a lot of things contributing to this, but it was an important piece of it. And I think it's one that a lot of us kind of overlook. And we've talked about journaling, but again, journaling before bed, it's another wonderful way to calm your mind, whether it's free writing or a prompted journal. It's just a great way to relieve thoughts that keep coming up, because that way when you're getting them down physically on paper, or maybe it's just your notes app, whatever, it's going somewhere other than ruminating in your head. And you can always revisit them later, right? Save them for tomorrow. Save them for another day. Put them down and let them go. That's what I like to say. Another option you might want to try, if you have this available to you, if you have a bathtub, is to wind down with a nice bath. Maybe try some lavender Epsom salts. That's what I did. I definitely enjoyed it. The catch here, no TV, no distractions, no nothing. Personally, I didn't even read, although I personally feel like that's a great thing to do, is to be able to kind of just like wind down in a nice bath. But I personally use this as an opportunity to meditate and breathe. Hey, my friend, are you needing some relief from your grief? If so, I have an exciting new offering that will help you get exactly that. My 14-day Relief in Your Grief challenge brings you powerful, impactful, bite-sized daily content alongside the perfect meditation. One of the biggest struggles I hear from my members, clients, and people on social media is that they just need some relief from the stress, sadness, and pain that grief and loss can cause. But here's the thing. So many people are lost and unsure about where to start. This can feel like a huge thing to tackle, so we are doing it together, and we're starting with just 14 days. Give me 2 weeks and I will help you begin to take that anxiety, heartache, and anguish and turn it into peace, clarity, and hope as you move forward with your grief. Seriously, what do you have to lose by joining? Challenge your grief and give yourself some relief, my friend. I have no doubt this 14 days will be an inspiring, uplifting, perspective-changing experience for you. Join now through the link in the show description. Truthfully, what would usually happen is I would cry. I would feel my emotions very deeply. They came in full force. I let them run. I let them come out. It was very, very cathartic. And water is very, very energetic. It's a way, I've heard this many, many times where it's kind of a way that we can get in touch with our loved ones. We get in touch with ourselves. It is an energy force. It's a life force. So baths are more than just, sticking a few candles around and calling it a day. When we really breathe into it and really use that energy around us, it's pretty incredible what can come up. But again, you don't need, an Epsom salt bath to enable all of this to come through. Anytime, anywhere you can or want to sit with yourself to let these things come up to the surface, that is a beautiful practice. And yes, we can feel our emotions and our grief very, very loudly and intensely in practices like this. And it's not always fun. It's not always pleasant. It's raw. It's very vulnerable. It's not always easy. But remember, it opens us up to a lot of clarity and peace, perhaps not right away, but certainly with some time and doing it frequently enough. And also, please remember that when Epsom salt is dissolved into water, it releases magnesium and sulfate ions, and that can help your brain produce neurotransmitters that induce sleep and reduce stress. So that's just one more reason why, if you can manage an Epsom salt bath, to give that a shot, because all of those things together, great way to wind down. So to start finishing this up here, let's just quickly talk about vitamins and supplements. I want to mention one more time, I am not a doctor. I am not like a health and wellness professional. That is not my forte. Here's what I know. Magnesium may help your body produce melatonin as well, which is a hormone that helps promote sleep. Now, talking about baths really quick, some might say that the calming effects of Epsom salt baths, or really just a bath in general, are simply due to the relaxation caused by taking a hot bath. Listen, even if that's the case, at least you're relaxed, right? You're doing something right. Speaking of magnesium really quickly, studies show a lot of people actually don't consume enough magnesium, so this supplement could be a good option for you to help promote good sleep if you need it or if you want to try it. But of course, please make this decision at your discretion. Consult with a doctor before adding this to your regimen, all the things. Also, melatonin, as I just mentioned, is another hormone that your brain produces in response to darkness. So it helps with the timing of your circadian rhythms, that 24-hour internal clock that we have, and ultimately with sleep. And similar to magnesium, melatonin could be, a good, more natural option for you, but I will say it again, be smart here, do your research before taking it. I personally have actually used melatonin before, more before I had my daughter and got pregnant and everything. I personally did feel it was helpful, but again, it's whatever feels aligned and right to you. Another final method that I'll share that I did in my own journey is to reassociate your bedtime with something positive. I have a quick experience to share that kind of segues into this. As I was mentioning earlier about moving from the guest room of my parents' condo to the primary bedroom with the proper bed, I could feel the energy around me in that room, like really feel it. Like my parents were still there. There was almost like a buzzing. It was crazy, you guys. It has settled with time. But I also have to tell you, I've never had more like tangible, realistic dreams than I have had in the first maybe like, I'll say six months after both of my parents were now gone. Like there was a dream once that was so vivid that I could feel my mom's hand, like her nails even. I could still feel it now sitting here telling you this. It was amazing. But there's actually a reason that sometimes this can happen. And you may or may not have heard about this, but I've heard and personally spoken with many mediums and other clairvoyants that say our loved ones will often come to us in our sleep. And you might be wondering why that is. It's because that is when our minds are the most, quote, turned off. it's when they can finally sort of break through all of the walls that we have up here in the physical world that our ego creates, emotional or otherwise, and they can kind of break through the grieving, the ruminating, and the thinking that we're doing during the day and actually chat and visit with us. So maybe this is happening to you, and if it is, maybe that's why. And I think that's pretty amazing, but I also think it's yet another reason that we need to be open to this and get that consistent sleep. And I've heard so many people saying, I wish I could connect with my loved ones. I wish they came to me in my sleep and in my dreams, but we have to be able to get that good sleep in order for that to happen, right? So you never know. But I wanted to bring that up because I think that's so interesting and really cool. But to kind of come back to my initial point, sorry, that was a total tangent, but I love to mention that because it can feel very comforting, very surreal, right? But to bring this back to my point about reassociating our sleep with something more positive, I did, or at least I tried, everything I just told you, with the exception of magnesium and melatonin because I hadn't discovered those yet. Sometimes these methods worked better than others. When it wasn't working and I was just feeling absolutely broken and very sad and I just needed something happy for once, I broke one of my cardinal rules and I turned to a funny show. I did what everyone tells you not to do, and I watched TV in bed. I've mentioned it here on the podcast, and you might hear this too. That's typically frowned upon, right? Because the brightness of the screen and all of that can keep you up. But you know what? And I want you to hear this today. I didn't care at that point, and I don't blame you if you don't care either. Sometimes you just want some freaking peace and laughter and positivity. And for me, I wanted to go to bed on a high note, or as high of a note as I could get, given the circumstances. Whatever happy show I watched back then, I couldn't even tell you what it was now. I think The Office for sure. Heart of Dixie was another comfort show to me. Either way, whatever I did, whatever those shows were, it did help. Did it keep me up later? Yes, it did. It did sometimes. But by distracting myself with something where my mind didn't have to think so hard or run so much, it allowed my mind to rest and therefore fall asleep. And I bring this up because eventually I worked my way out of that. And I maybe wound myself down with the show, but then ultimately used a meditation or a deep breathing exercise to get me to sleep. So I just want to validate that today, so maybe some of these things I'm talking about, you're like, Tara, I'm not really there. I still need some TV. I need one with my phone. As always, just take this a day at a time, give it a try. Maybe you end up decreasing the amount of time. So let's say you watch a show before you go to bed. Maybe start taking that down a few minutes. Maybe you stop it at a commercial break, or maybe you go from the full thing to only watching half. Or if you're scrolling on social media or whatever, and please be cautious of doing this because sometimes this can make your grief worse. But maybe you're scrolling for a good 10-15 minutes, decrease that each and every day to eventually to where you don't need it, right? So make this work for you, because I want to acknowledge that some of the things I'm saying here today might feel a bit out of reach. It depends on where you are in your grieving journey. But that being said, I just wanted to paint a very realistic picture of what this looks like and just validate and acknowledge that. But with sleep issues touched on now, let's take a quick step back and just get into a few other ways to relax and calm your mind. Things that you can implement when rumination or insomnia just get to be too much, or if you're just having a stressful or sort of anxious moment. Just a few very quick things here to wrap this up. Number one, exploring ASMR. So if you are not familiar with ASMR, which means autonomous sensory meridian response, I highly encourage you to check it out, because ASMR can be very relaxing and soothing, and it can really help with anxiety and promote better sleep. And if it wasn't a show that I was watching, for sure I turned to ASMR. And I have lost track of how many times a good ASMR video has put me to sleep. And I definitely took advantage of those in my earlier days of grief as well. And actually in college, long before my parents ever died, but I was just off at college, and there were many, many nights where for some reason I just had issues falling asleep. I don't know if it was being in a new place or what, but that's really when I discovered ASMR. And there are so many amazing ASMR artists on YouTube. Their stuff's totally free. Seriously, go check it out. It's a fantastic resource. Also, invest in better sleep equipment. I cannot stress this enough. Think about it. We spend 1/3 of our lives sleeping and in our beds. That is a lot when you really think about it. Now, I know mattresses aren't exactly the cheapest purchase in the world, but I promise you that and a really good quality pillow are worth an investment. And nowadays, especially, there are fairly inexpensive options out there. Like anything else, do your research. I love the Sleep Doctor. I discovered the Sleep Doctor a while back. It's a trusted resource for me, at least. It's not an ad, by the way. It's just something that I stumbled upon that I've used before. I've looked on the website. I've read articles. They're great. Just remember that you don't need like the fanciest Tempur-Pedic mattress in the world or on the market. A lot of factors come into play when you're shopping for a mattress. Your sleep position, firmness preference, whether you prefer hot or cold, the list goes on. So just keep all of those factors in mind when you're looking for a compatible mattress for you. Let's say you just can't invest in a new mattress right now, or you're just on a budget. Fair enough. Either investing in a slightly less expensive mattress or using the one that you have, but maybe looking for a mattress topper. That can make a world of difference. And in fact, that is actually what my husband and I use. We don't have any crazy fancy mattress, but we have this amazing mattress topper and it is heavenly. And we absolutely love our bed. So I just can't exclaim enough about that. But also having a good pillow, as I just mentioned. In my case, I will be very honest with you. I have yet to find, quote, the one. I have tried so many pillows. I have tried ones that, are supposed to contour the shape of your neck. I never end up using them for very long. I've tried fluffy ones. I've tried flatter ones. I've tried a lot. The one I have for now, it gets the job done. But honestly, a good Google search will show you countless results. Again, just do your research. Reading reviews of other purchases is my go-to, especially to kind of figure out which ones are, kind of up to snuff. But the reason I bring up the pillow being so important is neck and shoulder tension are one of the most common physical symptoms of someone grieving because we hold so much stress there. So do yourself a favor. Don't force yourself to be miserable at night too, on top of everything else. Give yourself the gift of comfort and relief. You deserve it. Okay? Remember that. Okay, last thing here. Avoid alcohol and caffeine. Both of these substances can interfere with your sleep, especially if they are taken or consumed, I should say, at the wrong time. Typically, from studies show that a cup of coffee after 2 p.m. can keep you from settling down later on. Meanwhile, drinking alcohol before bed can keep you from getting enough deep sleep. So I will keep this point short and sweet for now. Just try and avoid them, especially during those time frames if you can. All right, closing thoughts here on this topic to wrap this up. Getting quality sleep after a significant loss can feel next to impossible. I really, really want to validate that today. Or at the very least, it can feel very inconsistent. Maybe we have some good nights, some decent nights, and some nights we are just up with the craziest insomnia we've ever experienced. For the best opportunity for healing long-term, remembering that that is a continuous process, your general happiness in your daily life and productivity in both work and your personal life, sleep is pivotal. Now, with this next point, I never say these things to instill fear in anyone, but it's really just to hammer home the importance of sleep. Sleep deficiency is linked to a lot of chronic health problems. So think heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, obesity, and depression. Sleep deprivation also negatively affects your mental abilities and your just overall emotional state, which you might have already noticed, right? Especially if you're listening to this particular episode. And you might feel more impatient or prone to mood swings. That I can definitely attest to. I am, even outside of my grief, I am I am cranky when I don't get enough sleep. I am that girl. But it can also compromise your overall immune system and your immune health. And that can ultimately lead to higher chances of getting sick when you're already feeling down because you're grieving. So the point is, sleep has never been more important to your health and healing than when you are coping with a loss. So don't do yourself a disservice and neglect this on top of everything else that you have been through. There are ways to cope with poor sleep, with insomnia. Hopefully this episode helped highlight some of those things today. There is really so much I could talk about on this topic, more than I could fit in a roughly hour episode. But if this is something you're struggling with, try one or maybe even all of the methods that I've laid out for you in this episode today. Give it a real shot, be really intentional about it, and I promise you will start to feel so much more refreshed and at peace, and slowly but surely you will have a new outlook on your life and your loss in no time. Might take a little time to get there, but you will, I promise. And I am here to help you along the way. Everything I offer here at Losses Become Gains, this podcast, all the things, I am so here for you. Please remember my DMs are open to you. My inbox is open to you. You're welcome to shoot me an email, hello@lossesbecomegains.com. I would love to help you more through your grieving journey if you need it. So with that being said, sending you a huge hug as always. I hope this episode was helpful today. If it was, please share this or the podcast with someone else who might need it too. I greatly appreciate it. And also, if you're enjoying it, sharing a review on whatever platform you're listening on would be so great. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode today, and I'll see you in the next episode. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, membership, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.